Before we begin, please remember that this presentation is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The numbers and quotes discussed are based on real-world industry data at the time of recording, but prices can and do change dramatically. This is not financial advice. The most expensive ice I've ever seen cost $450. It wasn't carved from a prehistoric glacier by a blind monk. It wasn't infused with gold flakes or blessed by a shaman. It was just frozen water, in a bag, on a private jet. And that wasn't even the most shocking line item on the invoice. That's the secret world of private aviation. It's a world built on an illusion of transparency, where the price you're quoted is almost never the price you pay. You see it all over social media. The reclining leather seats, the champagne toast with the skyline blurring behind you, the obligatory photo on the steps before you board. Flying private from New York City to Las Vegas. It looks like the ultimate power move, the pinnacle of success and freedom. But what does it actually cost? Not the fantasy number you see in a music video, but the real all-in out-the-door number? That question is surprisingly and intentionally hard to answer. The entire private charter industry is designed to be opaque. It's a labyrinth of brokers, operators, and FBOs, all speaking a language you don't understand. It's full of hidden fees, absurd markups, and gotcha charges that can inflate your bill by 30, 40, or even 50% from the initial quote. Well, today we are pulling back the curtain. We are going to rip it to shreds. We're not just going to give you a vague price range. We are going to architect an entire private jet trip from Teterboro, New Jersey, the main private jet hub for New York City, to Las Vegas, and we are going to break down every single line item on a real-world invoice. You will learn about the taxes they don't tell you about, the fees they hope you don't notice, and the ridiculous upcharges that make that $400 bag of ice look like a bargain. By the end of this, you will understand the real cost of flying private better than 99% of the people who dream about it. So let's set the stage. The mission is simple. You and 7 of your friends want to escape to Las Vegas for a long weekend. You want to leave the concrete jungle on a Friday morning and come back Monday afternoon, after you've hopefully won big. You want the full experience. No TSA lines, no crowded terminals, no middle seats. Just pure, unadulterated convenience and luxury. The flight itself is about 5 hours, crossing the entire country. Simple, right? Wrong. This is where the financial rabbit hole begins. The very first decision you have to make is the most important, and it's where the costs immediately start to spiral out of control: choosing your aircraft. You see, the cost of a private jet charter isn't a single number. Think of it as a stack of 3 distinct and often painful layers of cost. Layer 1 is the aircraft itself. This is the big sexy number they use to lure you in. It's the charter cost, usually based on an hourly rate. Layer 2 is the mountain of mandatory operational fees and taxes that get quietly added on after you've already fallen in love with the plane. And Layer 3, well, Layer 3 is the Wild West. That's where the magic and the madness happens. This is catering, high-speed Wi-Fi, ground transportation, de-icing fees, and all the other variables that can turn a pricey trip into a second mortgage. We are going to dissect all 3 layers, but everything, and I mean everything, starts with that first layer, the jet. The type of aircraft you choose dictates everything that follows. For a 5-hour flight from New York to Vegas, you have a few main categories to consider. First, you have light jets. Think of a Cessna Citation CJ3 or a Phenom 300. They're sleek, efficient, and the cheapest option. But here's the trap. For a coast-to-coast flight, they're a terrible choice. Most light jets can't make that 5-hour trip without stopping to refuel in somewhere like Kansas or Nebraska. That fuel stop adds at least an hour to your travel time, completely defeating the purpose of flying private for convenience. It's a false economy. So for our trip, light jets are out. Next, you step up to mid-size jets. This is the workhorse category of the private jet world. Planes like the Hawker 800 XP or the Learjet 60. They typically seat about 8 people, which is perfect for our group. And crucially, most can make the flight from New York to Vegas nonstop, but just barely. It's pushing the limits of their range, which means factors like strong headwinds could still force a fuel stop. The cabin is more comfortable than a light jet, but you'll still have to crouch a bit to move around. This is a viable, if slightly compromised, option. Then you enter the big leagues with super mid-sized jets. This is the sweet spot. We're talking about aircraft like the Challenger 350 or the Citation X. These planes were purpose-built for coast-to-coast American travel. They have true stand-up cabins, a private lavatory, a small galley for preparing food, and significantly more luggage space. They offer a huge leap in comfort and capability over a mid-sized jet. This is the category that truly delivers on the promise of private travel for a trip like ours. Finally, you have the top of the food chain, heavy jets. These are the Gulfstreams, the globals.
DG450S, DG550S.
These are flying boardrooms. They have cabins you can hold a party in, multiple seating zones, full galleys with flight attendants, and the ability to fly halfway around the world without stopping. For a trip to Vegas, it is absolute glorious overkill. And the price reflects that. So you have these categories, but how are they actually priced? This is the first big lie of the charter industry. The hourly rate. You'll see a broker advertise a Hawker 800 XP for, say, $6,000 per hour. You do the math, 5 hours to Vegas, 5 hours back. 10 hours total. 10 times 6,000, 60 grand, right? Not even close. That advertised hourly rate is a fantasy. First, the clock doesn't start when you take off and stop when you land. It starts the second the plane moves from its parking spot and stops when it parks at the destination. That's called block time. You have to add about 12 minutes of taxi time to each and every flight. For our round trip, that's 4 taxi periods, or roughly an extra 48 minutes of flight time you're paying for. Second, and this is the budget killer they don't tell you about, is repositioning. The specific Challenger 350 you want to charter might be based in Miami. If you want it in New York on Friday morning, you have to pay for the 2.5-hour empty flight to get it there. That's called a repositioning leg, and you are on the hook for every single penny of it. It can add tens of thousands of dollars to your bill before your trip has even begun. So I went out and did the work. I contacted multiple charter brokers and operators to get real, hard quotes for our hypothetical Friday to Monday trip from Teterboro to Las Vegas for 8 people. I requested one option from each of the 3 viable categories. Here's what the numbers for just Layer 1, the base charter cost of the aircraft, look like. For the mid-size jet, a Hawker 800 XP, the round-trip charter cost came in at $48,500. For the super mid-size jet, the Challenger 350, the price jumped significantly. The round-trip charter cost was $62,000. And for the heavy jet, the Gulfstream G450, the price for that glorious over-the-top experience, a staggering $91,000. Let that sink in. 91 grand, and we haven't even left the ground yet. We haven't paid a single dollar in tax. We haven't paid a landing fee. We haven't paid for a bottle of water, let alone that $400 bag of ice. This is just the starting point. This is only Layer 1. And in the next part, we're going to take these base numbers and pile on Layer 2. The avalanche of mandatory taxes and fees that will add thousands more to our bill. And when I say thousands, I am not exaggerating. This is where the dream of private aviation slams headfirst into the harsh reality of government bureaucracy and operational logistics. The first and most unavoidable fee you'll face is the federal excise tax, or FET. Think of it as the government's mandatory cover charge for entering the private sky. For any domestic flight within the United States, you are legally required to pay a 7.5% tax on the total amount you pay for that transportation. Let's be crystal clear about what that means. It's not 7.5% of some hidden wholesale cost. It's 7.5% of your entire charter bill. So, on our conservative $30,000 base price for that Citation CJ3 from Teterboro to Henderson Executive, you can immediately add another $2,250. Boom. Just like that. That money doesn't go to the pilot, it doesn't buy better champagne, and it certainly doesn't make the plane fly faster. It's a direct wire transfer to the U.S. Treasury, a tax that has existed in various forms for decades to help fund the Federal Aviation Administration and the National Aviation Infrastructure. It's the price of using the system, and it is completely non-negotiable. But the government isn't done with you yet. Not by a long shot. Next up is the domestic segment tax. This one feels like a nuisance fee, but it's just as mandatory. For every single leg of a flight, for every single passenger on board, a fee is charged. As of 2024, that fee is $5. Now you might be thinking, $5? Who cares? Well, on our flight with 8 passengers, that's an extra $40. Okay, still not a budget breaker, but it's the principle of it. It's another line item, another small cut in a death by 1,000 cuts. And it shows you the level of detail that goes into this billing. Every single person, every single takeoff and landing, is accounted for and taxed. So we have the big tax and the little tax. Now we move into the fees imposed not by the government, but by the operators themselves, though you'd have a harder time avoiding them than you would the IRS. The biggest, most controversial, and often most confusing of these is the fuel surcharge. This is the monster hiding in the fine print of your contract. You see, the charter quote you received was based on a specific price for jet fuel on the day they calculated it. But fuel prices are about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. They can swing wildly based on global oil markets, geopolitical events, or even just local supply and demand. Charter operators are not in the business of gambling on fuel prices. They refuse to absorb that risk. So, they pass it directly on to you in the form of a fuel surcharge. This isn't a small number. We're not talking about an extra $50. A fuel surcharge is often calculated as a percentage of the base charter cost, or as a fixed dollar amount per hour of flight time. For a 5.5-hour cross-country flight in a jet burning hundreds of gallons per hour, this fee can be astronomical. It is not uncommon for a fuel surcharge to add an extra $3, $4, or even $5,000 to our trip from New York to Vegas. Let's be conservative and call it $4,000. So let's recap. We started at $30,000. We added $2,250 for the excise tax. We added $40 for the segment fees. And now we've just piled on another $4,000 just to cover the fluctuating cost of the liquid that makes the plane go. Our $30,000 flight is now suddenly a $36,000 plus flight. And we haven't even discussed what happens when the plane actually touches the ground. Because the moment those wheels kiss the tarmac, another set of fees kicks in. These are the landing and handling fees. You can't just land a multi-million-dollar jet at an airport for free. The airport authority charges a landing fee, which is often based on the aircraft's maximum takeoff weight, or MTOW. A heavier plane like a Gulfstream pays a much higher landing fee than our little Citation CJ3. But even for a light jet at a busy, high-demand airport like Teterboro in the New York metro area, or a popular destination like Henderson for Las Vegas, you're paying a premium. This fee can easily be several $100s on its own. But the landing fee is just the beginning of your ground expenses. You also have to pay for handling. This is where the fixed base operator, or FBO, comes in. The FBO is the private terminal, the VIP lounge, the service station for private jets. They are the ones who marshal your plane into its parking spot. They put the chocks under the wheels. They roll out the red carpet, literally. They provide the ground power unit so the jet can run its systems without starting the engines. They coordinate the fuel truck. And for every single one of these services, there is a charge. Handling fees can be a flat rate, sometimes $500 to $1,000 or more at a major FBO. Or they'll waive the handling fee if you purchase a minimum amount of their very, very expensive jet fuel. It's a classic business model. Get you in the door with one offer and make the real money on the back end. So you either pay the massive handling fee, or you buy hundreds of gallons of marked up fuel. Either way, they get their money. So for our trip, we have to pay these fees twice. Once when we depart from Teterboro, and again when we arrive at Henderson. It is very easy to rack up $1,500 or more in combined landing and handling fees for a simple one-way trip between two major cities. This isn't a luxury. This isn't an option. This is the basic, non-negotiable cost of using the airport infrastructure. So now let's look at our bill. $30,000 for the plane, $2,250 for the FET, $40 for the segment tax, $4,000 for the fuel surcharge, $1,500 for landing and handling at both ends. We have just added $7,790 to our trip. We are now at $37,790. We have increased the cost by over 25%, and not a single extra amenity has been added. This is just the cost of doing business. This is the mandatory price of admission. And keep in mind, our trip is purely domestic. If you were flying to the Bahamas or Mexico or Europe, you'd be opening a whole new Pandora's box of fees. You'd have international handling fees, which are always higher. You'd have customs and immigration fees, sometimes charged per passenger. You'd have overflight permit fees for every country's airspace you pass through. Each one is another line item, another $1,000 here, $500 there, all adding up to a staggering total. So we've added almost $8,000 in these unavoidable, non-negotiable mandatory costs. Our initial quote feels like a distant memory, but this is where the operators have another trick up their sleeve, because everything we've talked about so far, from taxes to fuel surcharges, is essentially out of your control. You have to pay it. The next layer, that's where things get optional. But optional in the world of private jets is a very dangerous word, because if you choose the wrong option, or if you don't pay up for something that seems like a luxury, your entire multi-thousand-dollar trip could be delayed, diverted, or literally grounded. Let's start with the most critical, most misunderstood, and most potentially trip-destroying optional cost of them all: de-icing. If you're flying out of Teterboro, New Jersey, in the middle of February for your big Vegas weekend, the weather isn't always going to be your friend. Ice, snow, freezing rain. These aren't just inconveniences. They are killers. Ice accumulation on a plane's wings disrupts the airflow, destroying the lift that keeps a multi-ton metal tube in the sky. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most dangerous conditions a pilot can face. So, when your pilot walks into the pristine FBO lounge where you're sipping a complimentary espresso and says, "Good morning, we've got some frost on the wings, we're going to need to de-ice before we can depart," this is not a suggestion. It's a command from the laws of physics, enforced by the FAA. But here's the trap. On your initial charter quote, the line item for de-icing will often say "billed as incurred" or "as needed." The first-time flyer sees this and thinks, "Okay, a 50-50 chance we won't need it. We'll save some money." They completely underestimate the cost. They're thinking maybe it's like the little spray bottle they use on your car windshield. $100? $200? Try $5,000. Or $10,000. Or on a larger jet in a severe storm, upwards of $25,000. Why? Because you're not just paying for some fluid. You're paying for a specialized, high-lift truck to come to your specific aircraft. You're paying for a highly trained ground crew to operate it. And you're paying for the fluid itself, which is a complex glycol-based concoction that can cost hundreds of dollars per gallon. And they don't just use 1 gallon. They douse the plane in it. This is a non-negotiable safety procedure. If you refuse to pay, you do not fly. Period. The pilots will not and cannot take off. So imagine the scenario. You've got your Vegas show tickets. You have non-refundable hotel suites at the Wynn. You've got dinner reservations at Carbone. And your entire trip is being held hostage by a 5-figure charge you thought was just a small possibility. You either pay up, often right there on the spot with a credit card, or you go home. That is why optional is the most dangerous word in private aviation. It lulls you into a false sense of security about the final price. But let's say the weather is perfect. A beautiful, clear day in New York. You avoid the de-icing bullet. You're feeling good. You board the jet, and you're immediately thinking about the food and drinks. When people picture a private jet, they picture a scene out of a music video. Overflowing champagne, platters of gourmet food, lobster tails, and caviar. The reality? Unless you specifically arrange and pay for it, you are likely to find a sad little basket of prepackaged snacks, the kind you get at a Hampton Inn, and a cooler with some sodas, water, and maybe a single lukewarm bottle of generic Prosecco. That's the standard. Anything else is considered custom catering, and it comes at a price that would make a Michelin star chef blush. You want a sushi platter for your 4 passengers? That'll be $800. A nice cheese and charcuterie board? $450. You want a specific bottle of champagne, say a Veuve Clicquot? Okay, that bottle costs $60 at your local store. To get it on the jet, it'll be $300. A top-shelf bottle like a Krug could run you over $1,000. The sticker shock is immense. People ask, how is this possible? Are they making the sushi out of gold? The answer again is logistics. You're not just paying for the food. You're paying for a specialized aviation catering company, the only companies allowed to service aircraft at these airports to source, prepare, and deliver that food. They have to follow strict TSA security protocols. They have to drive onto an active airfield. They have to coordinate with the flight crew and have it perfectly timed for your departure. Whether it's at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., you're paying for the ultimate convenience and the massive security and logistical overhead that comes with it. So that $800 sushi platter? The fish itself might be $50. The other $750 is the price of having it delivered to your seat at 30,000 feet. If you don't plan for this, your dream of a lavish sky-high banquet turns into an argument over who gets the last bag of sun chips. Okay, so you've navigated the de-icing threat, and you've decided to just tough it out with the complimentary snacks to save a few grand. Now you settle into your plush leather seat as the jet starts to taxi. You pull out your phone to post that obligatory wing view photo to Instagram, and no signal. You try to connect to the Wi-Fi, and you're hit with the third major optional cost bomb: in-flight connectivity. In our modern world, we assume Wi-Fi is a utility, like water or electricity. It's free at Starbucks, it's free at the airport terminal, so surely it must be included on a $50,000 private jet flight, right? Wrong. In the world of private aviation, Wi-Fi is a precious and wildly expensive commodity. First, many jets in the charter fleet, especially older or smaller models, don't have it at all. It's a multi-$100,000 upgrade to install the equipment, so many owners just skip it. If having Wi-Fi is a must for you, you need to specify that up front, which will immediately limit your aircraft options and likely increase your base price. But let's say your jet does have it. It's almost never free. You're going to pay for it, and you're going to pay a lot. There are generally two types. There's air-to-ground or ATG, which works like your cell phone, connecting to towers on the ground. It's faster and cheaper, but it only works when you're flying over land in the continental US. Then there's satellite Wi-Fi, which uses satellites orbiting the Earth, works anywhere in the world, even over the ocean, but is significantly slower and more expensive. How expensive? It can be a flat fee for the flight, maybe $1,000. Or, and this is where people get absolutely destroyed, it can be billed by the megabyte. You might see rates of $10, $15, even $25 per megabyte. To put that in perspective, streaming 1 hour of a high-definition Netflix show can use up to 3,000 megabytes. At $20 a megabyte, you're looking at a $60,000 bill to watch one movie. That is not an exaggeration. There are horror stories all over the industry of charter clients who let their kids stream YouTube and watch TikTok for a 5-hour flight, only to get a post-flight invoice for more than the cost of the flight itself. You think you're being careful just checking a few emails, but your phone in the background is automatically downloading software updates, syncing your photo library to the cloud, and refreshing all your apps. Before you know it, you've racked up a 4-figure bill without even realizing it. De-icing, catering, and Wi-Fi. These are the big 3 variable costs, the optional extras that aren't really optional if you want a safe, comfortable, and predictable experience. They are the primary reason the price on your initial quote is a fantasy, a best-case scenario number designed to get you in the door. The actual, final bill will almost always be higher, sometimes by tens of thousands of dollars. And we haven't even touched the fees that are baked into the price from the very start. The costs that are hidden in plain sight on your quote, using industry jargon designed to confuse you. Things like landing fees, ramp fees, segment fees, and the single biggest tax in private aviation, the federal excise tax or FET. This is the government's 7.5% slice of almost every single private charter flight in the United States. It's a tax on the amount paid for transportation. So on our $50,000 New York to Vegas trip, before we even talk about a single drop of fuel or a pilot's salary, you are paying $3,750 directly to the U.S. Treasury. This money funds the FAA, it pays for air traffic controllers, it maintains the infrastructure of the entire national airspace system. It's non-negotiable, unavoidable, and it's the first major chunk of your charter cost that has absolutely nothing to do with the airplane itself. Now let's get into the airport-level fees. These are the tolls you pay to the gatekeepers of private aviation. First up, landing fees. Every time an aircraft's wheels touch a runway, the airport authority sends a bill. This isn't some flat $5 toll. It's a calculated fee, almost always based on the aircraft's maximum takeoff weight, or MTOW. A tiny little Cirrus jet might pay $50. Our Challenger 350, weighing in at over 40,000 pounds, is in a completely different league. Landing at a premier business airport like Teterboro in New Jersey could easily be a $500 to $700 charge. And when you arrive in Las Vegas at Harry Reid International, they're waiting with their own bill, probably another $400 or $500. So right there, just for the privilege of touching down on the pavement at your origin and your destination, you've spent another $1,000. But you can't just land and leave the jet on the runway. You have to park it. This brings us to ramp fees and parking fees. Once the pilots taxi off the runway, they pull up to a private terminal, which in aviation is called an FBO, or fixed base operator. Think of the FBO as a combination of a 5-star hotel lobby, a high-end gas station, and a very expensive valet parking garage for multi-million-dollar jets. If the jet is just dropping you off and immediately flying away to its next trip, the FBO might charge a minimal ramp fee. But on our trip, the jet is waiting for you in Vegas for the weekend. It needs a parking spot. And parking a 70-foot-long jet isn't like parking a Toyota Camry. It takes up a massive amount of space on the ramp. In a high-demand city like Las Vegas, especially during a big convention or a championship fight, that parking spot is prime real estate. You can expect to pay anywhere from $300 to well over $1,000 per night. For our 3-night weekend trip, let's budget a conservative $500 a night. That's $1,500 just for the airplane to sit still on the ground. Now you might hear about FBOs waiving the ramp fee. This is one of the industry's cleverest little tricks. The FBO makes most of its profit not from parking, but from selling jet fuel at a significant markup. So they'll tell the operator, if you buy 300 gallons of fuel from us, we'll waive the first night's parking fee. It sounds like a great deal, but the operator was going to have to buy fuel anyway. The FBO is just ensuring they get that highly profitable fuel sale, and they've baked the cost of the free parking into their inflated fuel price. There is no free lunch in private aviation. Next on the list are segment fees. These are much smaller, but they illustrate the level of detail in aviation billing. The government charges a domestic transportation tax for each passenger on each leg of a flight. It's currently around $4.50. So for our hypothetical 6 passengers flying from New York to Vegas, that's one segment. 6 people times $4.50 is $27. The flight back is another segment, another $27. It's only $54 total, a rounding error on a $50,000 trip, but it's there, another line item, another small tax quietly added to the total. The real monster at the FBO, however, is the handling fee. This is what the FBO charges the aircraft operator for all the ground support services. When your jet pulls up, it doesn't park itself. A trained marshaller with glowing wands has to guide it into the precise spot. A ground crew has to place chocks around the wheels, connect a ground power unit so the jet can run its systems without starting the engines, and roll stairs up to the door. They handle your luggage, coordinate with the fuel truck, and service the aircraft's lavatory and potable water systems. All of this coordinated, specialized labor comes with a hefty price tag called a handling fee. For a mid-sized jet like a Challenger, this can be anywhere from $500 to $1,500 per visit. So that's one handling fee at Teterboro when you depart, and another one in Las Vegas when you arrive. For the round trip, you're looking at a minimum of $2,000, and possibly much more, just for the basic ground services required to get you on and off the plane safely. So let's pause for a second and tally up these hidden costs, the ones that aren't about the actual flying. We have the federal excise tax, $3,750. We have landing fees for both airports. Let's call it an even $1,000. We have 3 nights of parking in Vegas, $1,500. We have the segment fees, a mere $54. And we have the handling fees for both ends of the trip. Let's be conservative and say $2,500. When you add all of that up, you get $8,804. Nearly $9,000 of your $50,000 charter quote is gone before the engines have even started. This is the cost of the system. It's the price of taxes, airport access, parking, and the basic labor of moving the jet around on the ground. This is the money you spend for the privilege of using the infrastructure. But these fees, as staggering as they are just the ground-level noise. They are the cost of entry, the real financial vortex, the one that separates the merely wealthy from the aviation elite, happens at 40,000 feet. It's the cost of pouring thousands of pounds of fuel into the wings, the cost of paying 2 highly trained pilots to be at your beck and call for 3 days, and the single most terrifying line item in any jet owner's budget, which we'll break down next. That terrifying line item isn't a tax. It's not insurance. It's not some miscellaneous fee. It's the slow, relentless, and unstoppable ticking clock of mechanical wear. It's the cost of entropy. It's called reserves. And it is the single biggest financial trap in private aviation. To understand this, you have to completely change how you think about a machine. When your car's engine hits 200,000 miles and gives up the ghost, what do? You might sell it for scrap. You buy a new car. The car is disposable. A Gulfstream G450 is not disposable. Its 2 Rolls-Royce Tay engines are not disposable. In fact, each one of those engines is worth more than a dozen brand new Ferraris. You don't throw them away. But the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, has a rule. They say that after a certain number of hours, those engines must be taken off the wings, shipped to a certified facility, and completely rebuilt from the ground up. This isn't a suggestion. It's a non-negotiable, legally mandated overhaul. And the price tag for this procedure can easily top $4 million. For 2 engines. So how does an owner prepare for a $4 million bill that they know is coming, but might be 5 or 7 years down the road? They enroll in an engine program. Think of it as a mandatory savings account for your engines. The biggest players are the engine manufacturers themselves. Rolls-Royce has its corporate care program, Pratt & Whitney has ESP, General Electric has OnPoint. For every single hour those engines are running, the owner pays a set amount of money into this fund. It's not an option. If you want to maintain your jet's value and be able to sell it one day, you have to be on the program. So what's the hourly rate for our G450's engines? It varies based on the contract, but a typical number is around $1,000 per engine, per hour. Let that sink in. Every 60 minutes that this jet is in the air, a $2,000 bill is generated and sent to Rolls-Royce. It's a separate cost, completely independent of the fuel being burned or the pilots being paid. It is the cost of simply using the machine. Now let's apply that to our trip. New York to Las Vegas is a 5-hour flight. 5 hours times $2,000 an hour is $10,000. That's the cost for the outbound leg. But we have to fly back too. That's another 5 hours. Another $10,000. So, for our round trip to Vegas, we have to add a $20,000 engine reserve contribution to the bill. This isn't money for a repair. Nothing is broken. This is just the prepayment, the installment plan, for a future event that is guaranteed to happen. It's the ghost of a future invoice haunting every single flight. And why is it so expensive? Because a jet engine overhaul is one of the most complex mechanical procedures on Earth. We're talking about a machine with thousands of parts, spinning at over 10,000 RPM, with internal temperatures hot enough to melt the very metals they're made of. When an engine goes in for its mid-life inspection, it's completely disassembled. Every single one of the dozens of turbine blades, each a marvel of single crystal metallurgy that costs more than a luxury watch, is removed and microscopically inspected for stress fractures. Internal components are X-rayed and scanned with ultrasound. Anything that shows even the slightest hint of fatigue is discarded and replaced with a brand new, astronomically expensive part. The tolerances are measured in fractions of the width of a human hair. After being painstakingly reassembled, the engine is put on a test stand and run at full power for hours to ensure it performs exactly like it did the day it was first built. It's less of a repair and more of a rebirth, and that is what our $20,000 is paying for. But the nightmare of reserves doesn't end with the main engines. Oh no, that would be too simple. Do you see that little hole in the tail of the jet, near the top? That's the exhaust for a third, smaller jet engine called the APU, or Auxiliary Power Unit. When the plane is sitting on the ground in Las Vegas, the main engines are off. But the pilots need electricity for the cockpit displays, and you want the cabin to be a cool 72 degrees when you board, not a sweltering 110. That's what the APU does. It's a small turbine that provides electrical power and bleed air for the climate control system, all without having to start the massive, fuel-guzzling main engines. It's a critical piece of equipment, and guess what? The APU is also on a mandatory overhaul schedule, and it also has its own hourly reserve program. For a G450, the APU reserve costs about $200 per hour of its operation. So, for the hour it runs before we depart New York, the hour it runs before we depart Vegas, and maybe a few hours on the ground in between, we can add another $600 to our reserve tally. So we have the main engines covered. We have the APU covered. We're done, right? Not even close. Because we haven't talked about the plane itself. The wings, the fuselage, the landing gear, the flight controls, the hydraulics, the electronics, the entire airframe. Just like the engines, the airframe is subject to a rigorous FAA-mandated inspection schedule. These are known as checks, and they get progressively more intense. An A check might happen every 500 flight hours and take a few days. A C check is far more serious. It can happen every 2 years, take the jet out of service for a month, and involve taking apart the interior, removing control surfaces, and performing deep inspections that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then there's the big one, the D check. This happens maybe once a decade. It is a complete teardown of the airplane. The interior is removed. The engines are removed. The landing gear is removed. The paint is stripped off. The plane is returned to a bare metal shell, and every single structural component is inspected. A D-check can cost millions of dollars and take 6 months to complete. And just like the engines and the APU, owners don't just wait for that multi-million-dollar bill to arrive. They pay into an airframe maintenance program. Every hour the jet flies, they contribute to a fund that will cover the cost of these massive inspections. For our G450, this airframe reserve could be around $700 per hour. So let's do the final math on this invisible cost. Our flight is 10 hours round trip. 10 hours times $700 an hour for the airframe program is $7,000. Let's add it all up. $20,000 for the main engines, $600 for the APU, $7,000 for the airframe, That is a grand total of $27,600. This is the wear and tear bill for our single trip from New York to Las Vegas and back. It's a cost that doesn't buy a single drop of fuel or pay a single dollar of a pilot's salary. It's the phantom cost, the price of time itself, that every owner has to pay. So now we have the cost of the jet itself amortized for the trip. We have the fuel. We have the pilots. And we have the massive hidden reserve funds. The bill is already staggering. But we've only covered the costs of getting the machine from one piece of sky to another. We haven't paid for anything on the ground. We haven't paid for the right to land, the right to park, the people who guide the plane to its spot, the red carpet they roll out, or the fees charged by the exclusive terminals that serve the ultra-rich. That's the world of FBOs, fixed-base operators, and it's a whole new layer of the financial onion we have yet to peel back. So let's peel it back. An FBO is essentially the private jet world's equivalent of a five-star hotel, an exclusive country club, and a high-end concierge service, all rolled into one, and conveniently located right next to the runway. When you fly commercial, you walk through a massive public terminal. You deal with TSA, you wait at a crowded gate, and you board a plane connected to a jet bridge. When you fly private, you bypass all of that. Your car, often a black Escalade or a Mercedes S-Class, is permitted to drive directly onto the airport grounds, what's known as the ramp, and pull up just feet from your jet. You are stepping from the leather interior of your car to the leather interior of your aircraft in under a minute. The entity that makes this seamless, hyper-exclusive experience possible is the FBO. They are the gatekeepers to the world of private aviation. And for their services, they charge a king's ransom. These aren't just line items on a bill. They are a masterclass in monetizing convenience. Let's start with the most basic fee, the ramp fee. This is literally the price you pay just for the privilege of having your multi-million-dollar aircraft occupy a parking spot on their piece of concrete. For our trip from Teterboro near New York City to Henderson Executive Airport just outside Las Vegas, we're dealing with two of the most expensive and high-traffic private aviation markets in the world. At Teterboro, a popular FBO might charge a ramp fee of $500 to $1,000, and that's just for a quick turn, a drop-off. If you want to leave the jet there for a few days, the fee transforms into an overnight parking fee, which could easily be $1,000 per night. For a long weekend in Vegas, you're looking at $3,000 to $4,000 just for parking. Think about that. That's more than a month's rent for many Americans, and it's just the cost for the jet to sit still on the ground. But the ramp fee is often just the beginning. The real money is in what's called a handling fee. This is a bundled charge for the ground cruise services. It's for the guy who expertly marshals the jet into its spot with glowing orange wands. It's for the team that places the chocks under the wheels, connects the ground power unit so the plane systems can run without starting the engines, and handles the luggage. Oh, and the luggage isn't just tossed onto a conveyor belt. It's carefully, almost reverently carried from your car and placed precisely in the cargo hold. The handling fee also covers coordinating with the flight crew, providing weather briefings, and filing the flight plan. This fee can range from a few hundred to several $1,000s, depending on the size of the aircraft. For our Gulfstream G550, a heavy jet, we're on the higher end of that scale. At both Teterboro and Henderson, you can expect a handling fee of at least $1,500 to $2,500 on each end of the trip. So, right out of the gate, before we've even talked about the flight itself, we've spent upwards of $10,000 on parking and basic ground services. Now, here's the inside secret of the FBO world. Many of them will waive the outrageous ramp and handling fees if you purchase a minimum amount of their jet fuel. And this is where they really make their money. FBOs operate like the only gas station for hundreds of miles in the desert. They have a complete monopoly on the fuel sold at that private terminal, and they charge a massive premium for it. The price they charge is called the into-plane price, and it includes the cost of the fuel itself, plus a significant markup for the convenience of having it delivered directly to the aircraft by a specialized truck. While the wholesale price of Jet A fuel might be, say, $4 a gallon, a major FBO in a prime location like Teterboro or Vegas could be charging $8, $9, even $10 a gallon. Let's do the math on our G550. For a coast-to-coast flight, it will need to take on somewhere around 3,000 gallons of fuel. At a conservative price of $9 per gallon, that's a $27,000 fuel bill. The FBO might have paid $12,000 for that fuel. That's $15,000 in pure profit, just from one fueling of one jet. Now multiply that by the dozens, sometimes hundreds, of aircraft movements that happen every single day at these busy airports. you start to understand the scale of the money flowing through these private terminals. It is staggering. But the fees don't stop there. We're just getting to the a la carte menu. Let's say our flight is in January, and it's a cold, icy morning in New York. The wings of the aircraft are covered in a layer of frost. The plane cannot take off like this. It's a catastrophic safety risk. So we need de-icing services. A specialized truck will come and spray the entire aircraft with a heated, orange-colored de-icing fluid. This service is non-negotiable. And the price? It can be absolutely eye-watering. For a heavy jet like a G550, a full de-icing can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000. It's a surprise $20,000 charge that can appear on the bill moments before takeoff. And you have no choice but to pay it. Then there's the catering. Private jet catering isn't a bag of pretzels and a can of soda. The FBO's concierge service can arrange for literally anything you can imagine. Want a specific vintage of Dom Perignon champagne? Done. Want fresh lobster and steak from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Manhattan? They'll have it picked up, packaged, and waiting for you. Want nothing but a specific brand of Icelandic bottled water? And a bowl of green-only M&Ms? A strange request, but absolutely possible. This level of service comes at an astronomical cost. A high-end catering order for 8 passengers on a 5-hour flight can easily run $3,000 to $5,000. That's $500 per person for a meal on a plane. And we're still not done. Need a hangar to protect the jet from the blistering Las Vegas sun while you're in town? That's another $1,000 to $2,000 a night. Need the plane's lavatory service? That's a lav service fee of a few $100s. Need the potable water tanks refilled? That's a water service fee. Need a crew car so the pilots can get to their hotel? That's another charge. Every single interaction, every service provided has a price tag attached. When you add it all up, the ground-based FBO fees for our simple weekend trip from New York to Vegas can demolish a budget. Let's tally it up. $2,500 for handling at Teterboro. A surprise $10,000 de-icing. $5,000 for catering. $4,000 for parking and handling in Vegas. We are at $21,500. And that is a conservative estimate. We have just spent the price of a brand new Toyota Camry on services that happened entirely on the ground, before the jet's wheels have even left the pavement. This is the hidden infrastructure of wealth, a parallel world of logistics and luxury built to serve those for whom time is the only truly scarce commodity. We've calculated the cost of the plane, the fuel to get it there, and now the astronomical fees to service it on the ground. But there's one critical component of this entire operation we haven't accounted for yet. The highly trained, highly skilled human beings in the cockpit and the cabin. The pilots and the flight attendant. Their salaries, their insurance, their training, and their daily expenses are a cost that runs 24/7, whether the plane is flying or not. And that cost is one of the biggest of them all. So let's put a name and a number to this ghost in the machine. We're not talking about a line item on a spreadsheet. We're talking about the highly paid, highly skilled professionals who are, for all intents and purposes, married to this aircraft. When an owner buys a $20, $50, or $70 million jet, they aren't just buying a machine. They are buying the ecosystem that makes it work. And at the heart of that ecosystem is the crew. Let's start in the cockpit with the captain, the person in the left seat. Now your first thought might be, okay, a pilot. I know what they do. But in the world of private aviation, the title captain is an incredible understatement. This person isn't just a pilot. They are a logistics manager, a meteorologist, a travel concierge, and often, a trusted confidant to the aircraft's owner. They don't just fly the plane, they manage the asset. They are responsible for overseeing maintenance, planning every single flight down to the last detail, coordinating with ground services, and ensuring the absolute safety and comfort of some of the most powerful people in the world. The level of trust required is immense. This isn't like flying for a major airline where the pilot is an anonymous employee. The private jet captain often knows the owner's family, their business partners, their travel habits, their secrets. They have to be the epitome of discretion and professionalism. And for that, they are compensated handsomely. For a mid-sized jet like a Praetor 500 or a Citation Latitude, you're looking at a captain's salary starting around $180,000 to $220,000 a year. But for the Gulfstream G650 making our trip to Vegas, you don't even get a call back for less than $300,000. And for top-tier experienced captains with a flawless record, that number can easily push $350,000, even $400,000 a year. That's a neurosurgeon's salary. And that's just their base pay. But here's the kicker. You can't just take any pilot with an airline transport license and put them in the left seat of a G650. They need something called a type rating. A type rating is a specific certification from the FAA that says a pilot is qualified to fly that exact model of aircraft. Getting a type rating is an incredibly intense and expensive process. The initial training for a G650 can cost upwards of $100,000 per pilot. And it never stops. Every single year, that captain has to go back for what's called recurrent training. This is mandatory. They spend a week or more in a multi-million-dollar, full-motion simulator, practicing every conceivable emergency. Engine fires, explosive decompression, complete electrical failure, landing with no hydraulics. Scenarios so dangerous you could never practice them in a real airplane. This annual recurrent training costs the owner between $40,000 and $60,000 every single year for just one pilot. But wait, there are 2 seats up front. You also have the first officer, the co-pilot. They are also fully type-rated in the aircraft and share all the piloting duties. Their job is just as critical for safety and redundancy. Their salary might be a bit lower, but it's still significant. For that G650, a first officer is easily making $180,000 to $250,000 a year. And guess what? They also need that same $100,000 initial type rating. And they also need that same $50,000 recurrent training every single year. So right off the bat, you're looking at about $100,000 annually just in simulator training before you've even paid a single dollar in salary. So for our cockpit crew alone, we're at around $600,000 in base salaries, plus another $100,000 in mandatory annual training. We're at $700,000, and we haven't even left the hangar. Now let's move back to the cabin. The flight attendant. If your image of a private jet flight attendant is just someone serving champagne, you need to erase that image right now. That is maybe 10% of their job. A corporate flight attendant is a master of all trades. They are a safety professional first and foremost, trained in emergency evacuations, firefighting, and in-flight medical emergencies, often to a higher standard than commercial crews because they are the only one in the back. They are a gourmet chef, capable of preparing multi-course meals from a tiny galley kitchen. They are a personal assistant, anticipating the needs of their passengers before they even ask. They know that one passenger likes their coffee at exactly 185 degrees, and another needs a specific brand of sparkling water from a remote island. They are responsible for sourcing 5-star catering, stocking the aircraft with everything the owner could possibly desire, and keeping a multi-million-dollar interior absolutely pristine. It's a job that requires incredible attention to detail, grace under pressure, and again, absolute discretion. For this, a top-tier corporate flight attendant on a large cabin jet will command a salary of $90,000 to $150,000 a year, or even more with experience. They also require specialized training, which can cost another $10,000 to $20,000 a year, covering everything from culinary arts to advanced first aid. So let's tally it up. Captain, $350K. First officer, $220K. Flight attendant, $120K. That's $690,000 in base salaries. Add in the $120,000 for their combined recurrent training, and we are at $810,000. This is the fixed, annual cost of your 3-person crew. Over $800,000 a year just to have them on call. But the costs keep coming. These people travel for a living. When the owner flies from New York to Vegas and decides to stay for 5 days, the crew doesn't just fly home. They are now stuck in Las Vegas on call, waiting for the return flight. The owner is paying for their hotels, and they're not staying at a motel by the airport. They're in respectable business hotels. That's 3 hotel rooms for 5 nights. At $300 a night, that's $4,500 just for that one trip. They also get a daily expense allowance called a per diem. This covers their meals and incidental expenses. It can range from $100 to $200 per person per day. For our 5-day Vegas trip, that's another $2,250. So just in hotels and per diems for this one trip, we've added almost $7,000 to the bill. Over the course of a year, these expenses can easily add another $50,000 to $100,000 to the total crew cost. Then you have benefits. We're talking top-of-the-line health, dental and vision insurance. We're talking 401k matching. And we're talking about a very special, very expensive type of insurance called loss of license insurance. A pilot's entire career depends on their ability to pass a strict medical exam. If a pilot develops a condition, say high blood pressure or diabetes, or even just needs glasses with a slightly stronger prescription, they could lose their medical certificate and be unable to fly, instantly ending their six-figure career. Loss of license insurance is a policy that pays out in that event. It is essential and it is expensive, and the owner pays for it. Add in the cost of uniforms, cell phone plans, and other miscellaneous benefits, and you can tack on another $75,000 to $100,000 a year for the whole crew. So let's do the final math on the human cost. We start with $690,000 in salaries. Add $120,000 for training. Add, let's be conservative, $75,000 for hotels and per diems throughout the year. And add another $90,000 for benefits and insurance. The total annual cost to employ the 3 people who make this jet fly is $975,000, almost $1 million a year. That is the price you pay to have a team of elite professionals ready to safely fly you anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. It's a staggering number. It's a cost that ticks up every single second of every single day, whether the jet is flying across the country or sitting silently in a climate-controlled hangar. And now we have to figure out how to take that $1 million annual cost and all the other fixed costs we've uncovered and boil them down into a single number: the cost for just 1 hour of flying from New York to Las Vegas. To do that, we have to talk about the single most important variable in private jet ownership, the one that separates the merely wealthy from the financially savvy operators. It's a concept called utilization. Think of it like this. If you buy a $10 million vacation home but only use it for 1 weekend a year, the cost per night is astronomical. But if you live there full-time, the cost per night plummets. A private jet is a flying vacation home, and that $1 million fixed cost bill comes due every year whether you fly it once or 300 times. The more you fly, the more you dilute that massive fixed cost across each hour in the air. So let's run a few scenarios. Imagine an owner who is incredibly busy. Perhaps they bought the jet as a status symbol, but they only managed to use it for 100 hours a year. This is very low for an aircraft of this caliber. We take our $1 million annual fixed cost and divide it by just 100 hours. The result is a staggering $10,000 per hour. Let me be crystal clear. This is not the cost to fly the plane. This is the cost before you even think about flying the plane. It's the price of having it sit there, ready and waiting. For every single hour this owner is in the air, $10,000 of fixed costs are allocated to that flight, a silent tax for underutilization. Now let's look at a more typical owner. Someone who uses their G650 for regular business trips, family vacations, and maybe a few jaunts to Europe or Asia. A common utilization rate for a private owner is around 300 hours per year. So we run the same math. $1 million divided by 300 hours. That comes out to roughly $3,333 per hour. By simply tripling the flight time, the owner has slashed their fixed hourly costs by nearly 70%. This is the fundamental economic reality of aviation. The assets are so expensive that they are only efficient when they are in motion. But there's a third level, the pro level. This is the owner who decides to turn their multi-million-dollar luxury item into a revenue-generating asset. They do this by placing their aircraft on what's called a Part 135 charter certificate. This essentially turns their private jet into a licensed air taxi, allowing a management company to rent it out to other wealthy individuals, corporations, or celebrities when the owner isn't using it. This can dramatically increase utilization, often pushing it to 500, 600, or even more hours per year. If we take our $1 million fixed cost and divide it by 600 hours, the fixed cost per hour drops to just over $1,600. Now the owner still has to share the charter revenue with the management company. But this strategy can offset a huge portion, sometimes all, of the fixed costs, making ownership vastly more palatable. For our trip from New York to Las Vegas, we need to pick a realistic number to work with. The charter scenario is too complex, and the 100-hour scenario is an outlier. So let's stick with our typical owner. 300 hours of annual use. This locks in our first major number, $3,333. This is the amortized fixed cost for every hour our G650 is in the air. We'll call it the ownership tax. But that's just the cost of having the plane. Now we have to actually fly it. And this is where we enter the world of variable costs, the expenses that are directly tied to the turning of the engines. And the biggest, thirstiest, most relentless variable cost of them all is fuel. A Gulfstream G650 is powered by two massive Rolls-Royce BR725 engines. They are marvels of modern engineering, each capable of producing nearly 17,000 pounds of thrust. But to do that, they need to drink. They drink a specialized, highly refined kerosene called Jet A fuel, and they drink a lot of it. During the initial climb out of a busy airport like Teterboro, the G650 can burn over 800 gallons of fuel in the first hour. Once it reaches its cruising altitude of 45,000 feet, it becomes much more efficient, but it still consumes an average of about 490 gallons every single hour. The price of Jet A is not like the price of gas you see on a street corner. It fluctuates wildly based on the airport, the time of year, and the volume you purchase. At a major executive airport like Teterboro, you might pay $7 a gallon. At a smaller regional airport, it could be less. At a remote island FBO, it could be $10 or $12. Let's use that $7 figure from Teterboro. We take our 490 gallon per hour cruise burn rate and multiply it by $7. That comes out to $3,430 per hour, just for fuel. Think about that for a moment. Our fixed cost, the price of the hangar, the insurance, the pilot salaries, came out to around $3,300 an hour. The fuel alone costs more than that. You are literally burning through more money in kerosene than you are on the entire ground-based infrastructure supporting your $70 million asset. But we're not done. There's another massive variable cost that most people never even think about. It's maintenance. When you own a Honda Civic, you pay for an oil change when you get it. You pay for new brakes when they wear out. When you own a Gulfstream, you pay for maintenance on things that won't break for another 5 years. This is done through something called a Power by the Hour program. Every single component on a modern jet, from the engines to the landing gear, has a strictly mandated service life, measured in flight hours or cycles. The engine overhauls are the most expensive, costing millions of dollars each. Instead of getting a surprise $3 million bill one day, owners enroll in sophisticated maintenance reserve programs. They pay a fixed amount for every single hour they fly. That money goes into a dedicated account like a prepaid maintenance fund. For the Rolls-Royce engines on AG650, this program costs about $900 per engine per hour. Since there are two engines, that's $1,800 every hour, set aside for a future overhaul. There are similar programs for the airframe itself, covering things like avionics and structural components, which can add another $400 an hour. And don't forget the APU, the small jet engine in the tail that provides power on the ground. That has its own program, costing around $200 an hour. Add it all up, and the owner is paying $2,400 every single hour in prepaid maintenance fees. It is the ultimate form of pay-as-you-go, ensuring there are no financial surprises down the line. It's also a non-negotiable cost of doing business at this level. So now we can finally calculate our true hourly operating cost. We have our amortized fixed cost, the ownership tax, at $3,333. We have our fuel cost, burning bright, at $3,430. And we have our maintenance reserves, the phantom mechanics bill, at $2,400. When we add those three numbers together, we get our magic number. The all-in direct operating cost of a Gulfstream G650, $9,163. Let's round that up to an even $9,200. For every 60 minutes that aircraft is airborne, slicing through the sky at 90% of the speed of sound, it is consuming $9,200 of its owner's wealth. But our trip from New York to Las Vegas isn't just 1 hour. And the costs don't stop when the wheels touch down. In fact, some of the most surprising expenses are waiting for us right there on the tarmac. As you step out of the perfectly climate-controlled cabin and onto the air stairs, the dry desert heat of Las Vegas hits you like a wave. There are no lines, no crowds, no baggage carousels. A black SUV is waiting just feet from the aircraft, engine humming, ready to whisk you away to the Strip. This is the seamless, frictionless travel you paid for. But while you're settling into the leather seats of your Escalade, a whole new set of transactions is just beginning back at the plane. These are the costs that happen when the engines are off. The moment the wheels of that Gulfstream touched the runway at Harry Reid International Airport, a meter started running. First up is the landing fee. The airport authority charges this fee based on the aircraft's maximum takeoff weight. For a heavy jet like a G650, you're not paying the $50 a commercial passenger pays in fees. You're looking at a bill that can easily be $1,000 to $2,000 just for the privilege of using their strip of asphalt. But the airport itself is just the landlord. The real action happens at the FBO, the fixed base operator. This is the private terminal, the nerve center of all private aviation. They are the ones who guided the plane into its parking spot with glowing orange batons. They're the ones hooking up the ground power unit, so the jet systems can run without firing up the engines. They're providing the fuel, handling the baggage, and coordinating your ground transportation. It's the equivalent of a pit crew, a concierge, and a luxury hotel lobby all rolled into one. And this service is not complimentary. This is where you encounter the handling fee, or ramp fee. It's a mandatory charge for using their facilities and services. For a large cabin jet, this can range from another $1,000 to over $5,000, depending on the FBO and the level of service required. Need the lavatory serviced? That's a separate charge. Need the water tanks refilled? Another charge. Want the plane detailed while you're in town? You can get that done for a price. It's an a la carte menu where every item costs hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So before you've even checked into your hotel, you've already racked up another $3,000 to $7,000 in fees just for arriving. Now, where does a $60 million asset sleep for the night? It can't just be left anywhere. You have two main options: parking it on the ramp outside, or tucking it away in a hangar. Parking on the ramp is the cheaper option, but it leaves your multi-million-dollar aircraft exposed to the brutal desert sun, the sand, and the rare but possible desert thunderstorm. For a jet of this caliber, owners almost always opt for a hangar. Think of it like choosing between a street parking spot and a private, climate-controlled, security-monitored garage for a Bugatti. The hangar protects the paint, the sensitive electronics, and the tires from the elements. This secure metal box is, of course, priced accordingly. A hangar space for a G650 in a high-demand city like Las Vegas can cost between $1,000 and $3,000 per night. And the plane isn't the only thing that needs a place to stay. What about the two pilots and the flight attendant who just safely flew you across the entire country? They don't just vanish into thin air. They need to eat, they need to sleep, and they need to be well-rested and sharp for the flight back. The owner is responsible for all of their layover costs. This isn't a budget motel affair. Pilots for these high-net-worth individuals are typically put up in reputable, high-quality hotels like a Marriott or a Hilton, ensuring they get a proper rest. That's 3 hotel rooms, for as many nights as you're staying. On top of the hotel, each crew member receives a per diem. This is a daily allowance to cover food and incidental expenses, and it's typically between $150 and $250 per person per day. So for a 2-night stay in Vegas, you're looking at around $900 for hotels, and another $1,500 in per diems for the 3 crew members. That's nearly $2,500 just to ensure your crew is taken care of for the weekend. So let's do a quick tally for a weekend trip. We have our $75,000 flight from New York. We'll add $5,000 for landing and FBO fees. We'll add $4,000 for 2 nights in a hangar, and another $2,500 for the cruise layover. We're already at $86,500. But all of these ground fees, all of these crew costs, they're just the appetizer. The real, eye-watering expense that most people never consider is still to come, because that Gulfstream G650 doesn't live in Las Vegas. Its home base, its expensive hangar, and its primary crew are all back in Teterboro, New Jersey. And at some point it has to go home. After dropping you off, the owner has a choice. They can leave the plane and crew in Vegas, paying thousands every day for the hangar and the cruise expenses until you're ready to leave. If you're staying for a week, that's $14,000 in hangar fees and over $6,000 in crew costs alone, just for the plane to sit idle. Or, if the owner or another charter client needs the plane back on the East Coast, it has to fly back immediately. This return flight is known in the industry as a deadhead flight or an empty leg. The plane is flying its full 5-hour route, burning the same amount of fuel, requiring the same 2 pilots, and putting the same amount of wear and tear on its engines, but there's no one in the back. It's a ghost flight. And the cost of this ghost flight? It's almost identical to the flight that brought you to Vegas in the first place. The plane is still moving, so you're still paying that $15,000 per hour operating cost. 5 hours back to Teterboro is another $75,000. This is the brutal, hidden math of private aviation. You, the passenger, may have only taken a one-way trip, but for the owner it was a round trip. The cost of your single flight from New York to Las Vegas has just effectively doubled. That $75,000 flight is now a $150,000 operation. So let's run the numbers again on that weekend trip. $75,000 to get you there. 75 grand for the empty leg back to base. 5 grand in landing and FBO fees when you arrived. Suddenly, your weekend getaway has cost the owner over $155,000. And that's before you even fly home. When you're ready to leave Vegas, the plane has to fly from New Jersey back to Las Vegas. Another empty leg to pick you up before flying you home. A simple round trip for you is actually 2 full round trips for the aircraft. For flights, 20 hours in the air. A total operating cost of $300,000, plus double the landing fees and all the ground costs. It's a staggering economic reality. Every hour you spend in the air is often matched by another hour the plane has to fly empty. A silent, expensive journey across the sky that you never see, but the owner absolutely pays for. So $155,000 for your one-way trip. $300,000 for a round trip. Seems almost incomprehensible. But believe it or not, that's not even the expensive part. Not even close. We've only been talking about the cost to use the plane for a single trip. We haven't touched on the catastrophic 7-figure costs of simply owning it. The invisible forces that drain millions from an owner's bank account every single year. Whether the plane flies 1,000 hours or just sits in the hangar gathering dust. And that final shocking layer of cost is where the real story is. Let's start with the hangar. This isn't just a parking spot at the airport. For a $65 million asset like a Gulfstream G650, you need a private, climate-controlled, secure facility. Think of it as a supersized high-tech garage. In a high-demand area like Teterboro Airport just outside New York City, a dedicated hangar for a jet this size can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 a month. Let's be conservative and call it $20,000 a month, which is $240,000 a year, just to keep the rain off it. Then there's insurance. You can't just call up your local agent for a quote on a G650. This requires a specialized aviation underwriter. You need hull insurance to cover the plane itself, all $65 million of it, and you need massive liability coverage, often in the hundreds of millions of dollars in case anything goes wrong. The annual premium for a jet of this caliber is staggering. You're looking at a bill between $300,000 and $500,000 per year. Every year. That's the price of a very nice house, paid annually, for the peace of mind that you're covered. But the plane can't fly itself. And the people who can fly it are not gig workers you find on an app. They are elite professionals who command top-tier salaries. A G650 requires a minimum of 2 pilots. A captain, the lead pilot, will often have thousands of hours of experience and multiple type ratings. Their salary? Easily $250,000 to $300,000 a year. The first officer or co-pilot is right behind them, likely earning between $150,000 and $200,000. Many owners also employ a full-time flight attendant, trained in safety, service, and culinary arts, who can earn $80,000 to over $100,000. Add in the cost of benefits, health insurance for 401(k)s, and mandatory recurrent training, which can cost tens of thousands per pilot per year, and your total crew costs can easily exceed $600,000 annually. And you pay them whether you fly to Vegas this weekend or to Paris next month, or if you don't fly at all. They are on retainer, ready to go at a moment's notice. Now, who manages all this? Who schedules the crew, pays the insurance, tracks the maintenance, and ensures compliance with a mountain of FAA regulations? Most owners don't do this themselves. They hire a professional aircraft management company. These companies are the owner's personal flight department. For this service, they charge a flat monthly fee. For a G650, this fee typically runs from $12,000 to $20,000 a month. Let's call it $180,000 a year. That's another 6-figure check you write just for the privilege of not having to deal with the logistical nightmare of owning a private airline. So let's tally this up, just the basics. $240,000 for the hangar, $400,000 for insurance, $600,000 for the crew, $180,000 for management. We are already at $1.42 million. $1,420,000 in fixed costs before you've burned a single gallon of jet fuel. But we're not done. We haven't even touched the most complex and insidious cost, programmed maintenance. Think of this as a mandatory prepaid healthcare plan for your jet. The engines on G650 are made by Rolls-Royce, and virtually every owner enrolls them in a program called Rolls-Royce Corporate Care. You pay a fixed amount for every single hour the engines are running. This fee, which can be over $1,000 per hour, per engine, covers all future maintenance and overhauls, which can cost millions of dollars. You do the same for the airframe and the auxiliary power unit. It's not technically optional, because a jet that isn't on these programs is almost impossible to sell. Its resale value plummets. So while the cost is tied to usage, the commitment is fixed. If you plan to fly 300 hours a year, that's 300 hours times, say $2,000 for the engines and another $500 for the airframe. That's another $750,000 you have to budget for. So let's update our total. The $1.4 million in basic fixed costs plus that $750,000 in program maintenance means the owner is on the hook for over $2 million a year. $2 million. That is the cost of entry. It's the annual subscription fee for the key to your own airplane. Now let's bring this back to our trip from New York to Las Vegas. How do we account for this $2 million anchor? Simple. You have to amortize it. You spread that cost across every single hour the plane flies. If the owner flies a fairly typical 300 hours per year, you divide $2 million by 300. That comes out to $6,666. This is the number that changes everything. This is the owner's fixed cost per hour. It's the invisible number running on a separate meter during every flight. So, let's recalculate the real cost of our 5-hour flight. We had our direct operating costs, the fuel, the handling, the catering, the crew expenses, which we calculated earlier to be around $50,000. But now we have to add the cost of ownership for those 5 hours. That's 5 hours multiplied by our fixed cost of $6,666 per hour. That adds another $33,330 to the bill. Suddenly, the trip from New York to Vegas didn't cost $50,000. It cost over $83,000. That's the difference between chartering and owning. Chartering is paying for the ride. Owning is paying for the ride and a slice of the entire infrastructure that makes the ride possible. But hold on, there is one final cost. The most devastating, most significant, and most invisible cost of them all. The one that makes even billionaires pause. Depreciation. A $65 million Gulfstream G650 is a masterpiece of engineering, but it is also a depreciating asset. A brand new, top-of-the-line business jet can lose 30 to 40% of its value in the first 5 years of its life. For a $65 million aircraft, a 35% drop is a loss of nearly $23 million. That's an average of $4.6 million in value vanishing into thin air every single year. $4.6 million. That is the cost. It may not be cash leaving a bank account every month, but when the owner goes to sell that jet, that money is gone forever. It is the single largest expense of aircraft ownership, dwarfing fuel, maintenance, and crew salaries combined. So let's do the final brutal calculation. If the jet loses $4.5 million in value over a year of flying 300 hours, what is the depreciation cost per hour? It's $4.5 million divided by 300. That comes out to $15,000 per hour. Every hour that G650 is in the air, its market value is dropping by an average of $15,000. Now let's add that to our 5-hour trip to Vegas. 5 hours times $15,000 an hour in depreciation is another $75,000. So let's assemble the final true all-in bill. $50,000 in direct, out-of-pocket operating costs. $33,000 in prorated fixed costs for the hangar, insurance, crew, and management. And $75,000 in prorated depreciation, the silent killer of aircraft value. You add it all up. The real cost of that 5-hour flight from New York City to Las Vegas for the owner of a Gulfstream G650 is not $50,000. It's not $83,000. It's $158,000. That is the price of ultimate freedom. It's the cost of a time machine that can bend the map to your will. It's not just a transaction. It's the funding of a private aviation dynasty, with all the immense financial weight that carries. The next time you see a private jet streaking across the sky, you'll know it's not just a flight. It's a demonstration of economic power so vast, the cost of a single trip could change the lives of a dozen families. That is the real cost.